Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 8 of the Memorial Memo, KSR's Kentucky Women's Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Friends of Cole Katie. We have two games to kind of recap. We have a future game to look forward to. Just how are you today before we get started and all that?
It's getting to the end of the semester, classes are ending, I'm feeling good, and the season's going really well so far, so I'm feeling good today.
How are your finals and stuff going? Because I actually just wrapped up mine. I did like extra credit assignment before we started recording, but other than that, I'm done for this semester actually. So how's that going for you?
Yeah, I'm finished with all of my exams, but being a journalism student, it's a lot of projects, so got a lot of those going on right now, but other than that, I'm doing good.
Yeah, a lot going on right now, including some UK women's basketball. And Katie, I want to get this out of the way first. One, because it was kind of the first thing that happened, but two, just because I don't want to talk about it for too long, and I don't think anyone wants to. Kentucky loses their first game of the season to North Carolina, 72-53. Just, just not a very good game. It wasn't. I would say it wasn't even very competitive, kind of from start to finish, because
Mm.
North Carolina got out to that 21-6 lead to start the game, and that was basically it from there.
Yeah, I mean, we saw a lot of players not perform to what we had been used to, so it was definitely an anomaly to us. Like, we weren't really expecting this game to go the way that it did, especially because the players that didn't play great were the ones that we were used to carrying the team. So it was like a hard pill to swallow, but I think that in the end, this is going to be really good for the team.
Yeah, and just the main thing is, credit. Well, first of all, credit to North Carolina
Yeah.
because they executed their game plan. Courtney Bankart has, I think, in my opinion, she's had some really good teams there in Chapel Hill. I think that's probably the best team she's gonna have in her, I think, 6-year tenure so far.
Mhm.
North Carolina could very well be like a top 2, 3 seed. I think if they kind of keep things up. But yeah, just not a great game all around. Kentucky couldn't make a shot. They couldn't buy anything. You talk about Georgia Amore, who had 10 points, and she had 10 points at the half, and you kind of think, okay, Georgia's going to have a big game. Well, she goes 0-6 from the field
Mhm.
in the second half and ends with 10 points. Not a great game from her.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it a little bit in our rapid reaction, but we kind of are starting to expect more from her production wise. So her not scoring in the second half was very weird to see. And obviously there was something off, whether it was a mental block or, she was getting guarded really heavily. So credit to UNC for being able to contain Georgia. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely weird to watch the person who's supposed to be the best player on the team get stuck at the half and not be able to contribute for the rest of the game.
Right, and then you get someone like Claire Strack, and you want to talk about executing their game plan. They got her in foul trouble
Hmm.
with like 3 minutes to go in the first quarter. She had two or three fouls, and she sat pretty much the rest of the first half, and Kentucky just kind of couldn't compete from there. She only had 4 points. It's I think going into that game, you needed her to do her usual thing if Kentucky was going to come out and win. She just couldn't do it because of the foul trouble, and just couldn't really ever find a rhythm.
Yeah, and I think that it was very telling that there was some kind of like energy thing going on with the whole team because she only shot 2 of 10 from the field. And that's just not good. I mean, she does so much better than that usually. She missed both free throws that she took during the game, and she only had 4 rebounds, which to be one of the tallest girls out there and only rebound the ball 4 times is very odd. So she was obviously in her head, or UNC had gotten in her head before the game, or there was something. I don't really know, like, if there was anything going on, to be quite honest, but it just was very weird to watch.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the whole energy and the there's something going on inside of their head part of it because that was the case with Tiani Key,
Yeah.
and it was evident. She shot 5 shots and only scored 7 points. Not very good game from her at all. Just not the normal game you see. But post game and even after the Queens win, which we'll talk about, Kenny was like, he was like, I think he said, look, I've coached this is 4 times now. I've had a player on my team go play against their old school. And he was like, there's been times where we've won the games, but never has that player played well against their old school. It's an emotional thing. It's a mental block, I would assume. I'm not a player. I
Hmm.
wouldn't know what that's like. But just unfortunate that Tiani couldn't kind of light it up against her old team. And of course, she ended up doing better against Queens. Again, we'll talk
Mhm.
about it, but it's unfortunate that she couldn't kind of make her presence felt against North Carolina.
Yeah, and I think we almost expected her to come out against North Carolina and be the game maker and be the person that, well, she knows UNC. She's played there, so she's going to know how to play against them. She's going to know their weaknesses. But truthfully, I mean, like you said, we don't know. We're not players, but there had to have been some kind of mental block or something going against your teammates that you played with for 2 years. It has to be hard to like even get in that headspace to be able to play against them when you were so used to playing with them. So it was, I mean, 7 points, like that's fine, but not what we were used to seeing from her, especially against a game, like in a game like this against a ranked team where you probably should come out with the win, but you just don't.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like maybe you should have come out with the win. I mean, you were the higher ranked team, but that's a game on the road. And if there's
Exactly.
any game, I think me and you talked about this after the game or lesson or whenever. But if there was of all the games to lose so far this season, 9 games into the season now because of the Queens game, 9 games into the season, that North Carolina game, that's the one to lose. That's
Mhm.
that's a quad one loss. Of course, we were talking about it right before we started recording. The quadrant system is a lot different in women's basketball. It's a lot less forgiving, but that's still a quad one loss at North Carolina. I think North Carolina's number 16 in a net. I mean, that's again that when you look at Kentucky's NCAA tournament resume so far, that's I mean, yes, you lost
Mhm.
by 19, and that's definitely going to be something that they probably look into a little bit. Probably more so that 19-point loss, that's probably going to be like, oh, North Carolina's really good,
Yeah.
rather than Kentucky, oh, they didn't play that great. They're probably going to look at that more.
Yeah, I was just about to say that about like, yeah, Kentucky lost by 19, but does that really say anything about Kentucky or just North Carolina's ability to contain a team like Kentucky? So I think when it comes to ranking the teams, especially because Kentucky dropped rankings and UNC moved up, they probably looked into, okay, well, we had three UNC players in double digits, and they contained Kentucky to under 60 points, which I don't think that had happened yet all season. And then getting some of their best players in foul trouble and holding them to 10 points or less. Like that is just so impressive from UNC. So it was almost like this game was decided from the beginning. Like North Carolina came out with the energy and they clearly wanted to win more than Kentucky did just because I mean they have the home team advantage and they put up I feel like more of a fight than Kentucky did, but I don't think that when it comes down to it that this loss is going to be detrimental to Kentucky's ranking when it comes to tournament time.
Yeah, and I mean, I know I don't think we don't have a segment planned for it, but I mean, Kentucky's number 16 in the AP poll.
Mhm.
They only dropped 2 spots after getting pummeled in North Carolina. Clearly, people still think Kentucky is among the best teams in the country.
Mhm.
Just North Carolina's pretty good too. You had Deja Lawrence who had 17 points, shooting 3 of 6 from 3-point land. Katie, I thought, whenever others weren't stepping up, I thought Deja did a really good job, kind of finding her own shot and being able to contribute and try to help the team win the game.
Yeah, it's unfortunate whenever a player has a good game, kind of like Deja did, and the rest of the team isn't really on her rhythm. But of course, props to her for being able to put up 17. She made all of her free throws, so congrats to her for that. And then, yeah, I think she played great and she did good on defense. I think she's one of the better defensive players on this team, so it's always good to see that from her.
Yeah, and then you had Amelia Hassett, who we'll talk about in a minute because of her Queens game. But I mean, 13 points, 13 rebounds against North Carolina. Katie, correct me if I'm wrong. I think that was her first double-double of the season. You
Yeah, I
know,
think it
I
was.
and just a really good game from her. I mean, I feel like we talked about it on here, and we were like, man, we really need Georgia, or we really need the offense to help get some shooters open.
Mhm.
And Amelia gets open, and credit to her, she's knocking down her shots and making a big impact.
Yeah, and I think the good thing about Amelia is that when she shoots threes, they're not always wide open. So she's making those shots that are in a defender's face. And I think for the momentum of the game is really important to have such a good make like that. So Yeah, we take the wide open threes, but I think the threes that are contested are better for team morale overall.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Yeah, because obviously, it's like I was saying, you want Amelia to get open and you want her to be able to hit the open ones, but there's a plenty of times that when a defender's closing in on her, hand in her face, and she knocks it down. She's a shooter, and
Mhm.
we saw it preseason, like and open practices and
Mhm.
stuff. Like she can really shoot the ball, and we haven't seen as much of it from Lexi Blue just because she's not quite as much in the rotation at this point. But everything we saw from Amelia preseason, we're seeing now.
Yeah, I agree with that definitely.
Yeah, and then you have the Queens game that just happened. 87-45 win over the Royals. Katie, this is really exactly what this team needed.
Mhm.
I think, you got out to like a 20, 30-point lead in the first 10, 12 minutes of the game. That's exactly what this team needed. You needed a big bounce back win. Just, the Queens, I was talking to somebody pregame. I didn't realize this at the time, but they've only been a D1 program for, I think it was like 3-4 years now.
Mhm.
And I obviously, I think they're going to be, not. They're not going to be amongst like the top 25 teams ever, but they're going to be a decent program in the mid
Mhm.
majors when they get, when they get their foot set in stone. But just a good game all around. We have stats to go over, but just big picture, this is the kind of win you needed after that loss.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting to note that Queens head coach Jen Brown was actually a player of Kenny Brooks about, I think she said 17 years ago was the last time that she played under him. So that's really cool. And she said that she got a lot of her plays from his book. But of course, when you're going up against a team like Kentucky and you've only been in D1 school for that long, like it's going to be hard to compete. I think that this Queens game was the perfect bounce back game to get the confidence up. And we had four players in double digits. So I think that everybody was kind of on the same page last night. And um, yeah, I just think this was a good win and it was fun to watch.
Yeah, it was a great game. I think for because of how just stressful. The last three games have been pretty stressful. All against Power Five opponents or Power Four now. I guess Power Four now because the Pac-12 doesn't really exist. Uh, you know, you have that Arizona State game that was close for a while, and of course Kentucky ended up breaking through. Illinois game, Kentucky was down for a little bit, and then of course 18-0 run to kind of blow them out. North Carolina, you're down the whole time, you're stressed, you're going to lose, and then you lose. And then you have this Queens game, and you beat the non-conference opponent. You beat them down like you're supposed to. We just talked about Amelia Hassett, who had a pretty good game against North Carolina. Well,
Mhm.
she got a pretty significant personal milestone against Queens, recorded her 1,000th career point against the Royals. She's had 19 points on the night. Katie, just it's awesome to see.
Mhm.
It's awesome to see that you think about where she came from at Eastern Florida State College. JUCO school, coming up here to Kentucky, still making a big impact. 19 points, that's a season high for her. And then she gets her 1,000th career point. Just congrats to her.
Yeah, and we talked about this last night, but we kind of were talking about how Amelia Hassett has become one of those players that just gets better every game. Because like we said at the beginning of the season, we were excited for her to become a point producer like we had seen in practice because we know she can knock down those shots. We were just waiting for it to happen. So I think for it to be such a big game for her again is such a huge confidence booster, especially heading into conference play here in the next month or so. Yeah, congratulations to her on her 1,000th point because that is such an insane milestone. And then for her to do it while at Kentucky is just like the cherry on top, I think.
Yeah, and it's like you said, she's gotten better literally
Mhm.
every single game. And we talked about how we've been talking about her points, but those 13 rebounds she had against North Carolina. I think she had like 6 or 7 last night.
Mhm.
I could be wrong. I think it was around 6 or 7. Just another great game for her, right? She again, you just didn't know for sure how she would translate. And we haven't played against Mississippi State yet. Come January 2nd, we haven't started SEC play, but so far I think she's done about as well as you probably hoped Amelia
Mhm.
would do, and I think that's really good to see. Georgia Amore, 20 points on the night. I think that's her third 20-point game as a Cat. just good to see her score. And then she had 4 assists, and now 4 assists, that's still decent, but it's not
Mhm.
Georgia Amore. She averages, she averages double that per game. And I thought it was interesting because post game, Kenny Brooks is like, I told her to be more aggressive offensively, look for your shot more. He was like, she's been a great facilitator for us. And I mean, she's been the best facilitator in college basketball. I think she is the only player in the country averaging north of 8 assists per game. She's a tremendous passer, and that's honestly one of the main reasons why WNBA teams are looking at her and interested in her.
Mhm.
But I thought it was really nice to see that I can go get my own shot. I can be again. This is something that I feel like we talk about that you really need, especially maybe in like the NCAA tournament when you need a bucket to win. Georgia Amore was a bucket getter last night. I mean, step back threes and
Mhm.
crossing people over. I thought she had a really good game and really encouraging game.
Yeah, I think she had a great game. But to talk about the assists a little bit more and how she was being a little bit more aggressive with her shot. 9 of the 11 players that hit the floor last night had at least one assist. So the assists are getting way more spread out. Tiani Key had 4, Deja Lawrence had 5. She led the team in assists, and then Clara Strack had 3, Amelia Hassa had 2, and then a handful of other players had 1. Um, but I think that it is just so telling of the chemistry of this team, and especially now that Kenny has said, like, okay, you need to be more aggressive with your shot, and she's going to do it. And she's letting her teammates have those moments to get their assist and find those open looks. So I just think that she did such a great job facilitating, but also scoring.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, I feel like last night, and again, I know it's Queens. I know it's not the greatest team in the world, but I just thought it was so encouraging to see that she's able to go get her own bucket because
Mhm.
she kind of struggled with that
Yeah.
in the early parts of the season where she had tried to, to shot, and it's not like she wasn't able to get open. Like she was able to find, create separation, but the shot just wasn't falling. But
Mhm.
it did last night. You had Clara Strack, 16 points, 6 rebounds, 2 steals, and 2 blocks. Good bounce back game for her, right? I mean,
Mhm.
I feel like that's kind of the big thing. Last night was just a big confidence building game. We talked about that in our rapid reaction a lot. Just there's a big game coming Saturday that again we're about to talk about. But Claire Strack, that stat line of 16.6 rebounds, 2 steals, 2 blocks, just a good game from her. After laying an egg kind of against North Carolina, she had a really nice bounce back against Queens.
Yeah, I was really glad to see that, especially because Kenny had told us in the press conference that during practice she had been practicing really hard but not playing well because she just wanted to improve. And I think that that goes to show about the kind of player that she is. And Kenny Brooks told us about a conversation that he had had with Liz Kitley over the weekend, asking her when was the point that you felt like you kind of carried the team on your back, like you had to perform well in order for the team to win. And she said that that was what, her junior year?
Yeah.
Well, Clara's only a sophomore, and she's a young sophomore at that. So I think there might have been a part of her that thought, okay, well, if I don't perform well in this game against North Carolina, then we're not going to win. And of course, that gets in your head a little bit. It makes you honestly probably play worse. And I kind of got the feeling that after the loss, she put a lot of the blame on herself. So it was good to see that she could come back and, get in double digits again. And it's also good to see that she's still shooting the 3 ball. She went 0 of 4 from the perimeter, but I think it's gonna fall eventually. So we'll see it. We'll see her have a good game from 3, but it's good to see that she's still shooting
Yeah, we've seen her hit the three.
that. Yeah.
Maybe not at the clip we would quite want, but I mean she's been able to hit the three. But I think that's so interesting you were talking about because, I mean that's exactly like you said. Like Kenny talked to Liz Kitley, and he was like, "So when did you feel?" And it's like you said, like when did you feel like the pressure was on you to go win these games?
Mhm.
And it's interesting because she said her junior year. Clara Strack is supposed to be a freshman. She turned 19 last week. She's a youngin, right? She's young, but she plays such a big role. But I think it's really interesting, Kenny, because we'll talk about Tiani Key in a second too. But Kenny, he sat down with some of the players after that North Carolina game, and he was like, "Look, it's okay. Like, take a breath. It's all right." And I thought that was really interesting, and that I
Mhm.
feel like that you talk about coaching and you think about like halftime adjustments and drawn up plays, out of bounds plays and whatnot. But, it's kind of part of it too that I guess we don't really think about is like just making sure your players are good. Like,
Yeah.
hey, he said it in the post game press conference. He was like, we had to remind them that we're 7-1. Now we're 8-1. Like, we're okay. We're
Mhm.
still good. We're fine. He said, I'm pretty sure like the exact quote he said was like, it's not. He said he's like we told them, it's not that you're playing bad. It's that you played bad against North Carolina. There's a fine line there. There's a big difference there, and I just thought it's really nice to kind of see Kenny kind of talk about his players like that. Like, you know, we I know you're human and you can go out there and mess up. It happens, and you just kind of move on. You're again Kentucky, and it's like we said, of all the games to lose, that was the one, and Kentucky's still in a pretty good position. Talk about Tiani Key. She had 12 points, 13 rebounds, 4 assists. Tiani, she was another one who didn't play great at North Carolina. She kind of struggled and like got in her own head. And she was another one who Kenny talked to after that game. I think he said on that Friday, the day after, and he was like, "It's all right." It was like, you're good. And I think she kind of came out and played really well against Queens. Just again, what you needed to see kind of help build that confidence back up.
Yeah, and I was glad to see her play well, especially we talked about this a little bit post game, but she was getting honestly beaten up. Queens was a very scrappy team, and I feel like Tiani Key was kind of the one that they were targeting the entire time. Even though Georgia Amore was getting double teamed, it just felt like every time Tiani touched the ball, there were like four people just running at her, trying to get that ball out of her hands, and she was falling on the floor and running everywhere and like hustling. I think she was like the hustle player of the game. Um, but it was just good to see her keep her composure. I feel like I've said this before, but I think that Tiani Key is very poised in the way that she plays. And so regardless of how defenders are treating her and if they're, tossing her around and just like bullying her on the post, I think that she keeps her composure and she's able to produce, especially under pressure like that. And I think that that's really good to see from her, and it's really important heading into January.
Yeah, just again, it's one of those things like Tiani, and I thought it was great. I think last night in Rapid Reaction, you're like, they are beating up Tiani Key. Like they are, like she has a black eye now. Like not really, but she's like Tiani Key is just getting punished out there, and she continues to hang in there and kind of do her thing. And she, again, good bounce back game from her too. Deja Lawrence didn't score a ton. She only had 7 points, but she had 5 assists too. And
Mhm.
she ended up being the main distributor throughout the game. And I thought it was kind of interesting. There was a point. Now, obviously, you take Georgia Amore out because you want to rest her. You don't want her to get hurt, but you want to get some bench players in. But I thought it was an interesting lineup Kenny ran last night with Deja Lawrence, Lexi Blue, and then Amelia Hassett, Tiani Key, Claire Strack, where Deja ran the point, and I don't think we've seen that all year. Now, she did that at Charlotte. She knows how to be a point guard.
Mhm.
But, at Kentucky, Deja Lawrence has been a two guard, and she's been, on the receiving end of passes. But last night, we kind of saw where she's passing the ball again, and
Mhm.
she's being the point guard, kind of facilitating things whenever Georgia's not in. And I thought that was really good to see because there may be a game come in conference play where Georgia gets in foul trouble or, God forbid she gets hurt and you need someone to step up. And obviously,
Mhm.
Cassidy Rowe can do that as well, but it's good to see Deja do that too.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we got a lot of bench action last night because, like you said, you're not going to keep, Georgia Amore in for all 40 minutes if you really don't have to. So, Deja only played 26 minutes, but I think during that time, she did such a great job of just being the facilitator. I feel like most of the time she was in, she was um, at the two, but getting to see her at the one was really fun, especially because even when Georgia Amore isn't in, I feel like Kenny just automatically goes to Cassidy Rowe to run the point. I feel like it's just what we see most of the time. So I like that he switched it up. And I mean, she went 3 of 4 from the field, so she was pretty efficient. Of course, she didn't shoot that much, but I mean, I'll take those 7 points from her because we got 5 assists out of it.
Yeah, it's really encouraging. I think last night, you just think about like obviously you're supposed to be Queens by 42, but I thought it was really encouraging. And honestly, Kentucky could have scored 100 and probably beat them by 60 if they wanted to, but Kenny decided to, and rightfully so, play the reserves, for some extended time. Like I think Lexi Blue had like 20 minutes last night. That's really good to see.
Mhm.
Snia Tyler, she had the most minutes she's had all year. She had 3 points. That's good to see. Katie, last night Kentucky moved to 8-1. But now they have to play again. They have to play Purdue on Saturday. They play, Purdue. Obviously, you're going on the road. I think that's important. But there's also like Purdue's a power conference team. I know Purdue's not USC or South Carolina or UConn, but they're still a power conference team. Saturday is not a gimme game at all. It's this is a must-win game. And I know it's like, you can say every game is a must-win game. Well, Kentucky, we talked about, Purdue's a power conference team, but they're not a great one. If you lose Saturday, that's a quad 4 loss.
Mhm.
And if the quadrant system you're not super familiar with, that's basically just what the NCAA uses when they go to do their seeding for the NCAA tournament. And a quad 4 loss is is the worst loss you can have. To Purdue's 155th in the net. I mean, just if you can see the screen, or if you're listening, you can hear me say it. Purdue has some, they're 5-4, but they have losses to Notre Dame, Middle Tennessee, who's not a bad team, South Carolina, and Maryland. So that's 3 top 10 teams, and then a Middle Tennessee team who, last season in the NCAA tournament beat Louisville. I'm not sure what Middle Tennessee's record is right now, but they're always a pretty good mid-major team. And so this, Purdue, I mean, the record looks bad. They're 5-4, 0-1 in the Big Ten. But, I think they had a 9 or 8 point lead on Maryland at the half, ended up losing that game. But, the record looks bad. Purdue's not a horrible team, and it's kind of weird because at the same time, though, Katie, you have to win this game, because if you lose, that's a quad 4 loss on your resume, and that can cost you a couple seed lines in the NCAA tournament.
I mean, yeah, and especially because those losses that Purdue has to those top 10 teams are not terrible losses. I mean, to Notre Dame, I think they lost by like 40, or 40 or 50, like somewhere around there. To Maryland, they only lost by 9, and Maryland is ranked at 7. And so I think that just shows, I mean, Purdue might not have, the same kind of production that Kentucky has, but they can hang right with those top 10 teams. So it definitely could be like, we talked about it a little bit yesterday, almost like a trap game for Kentucky, just to get them off rhythm and off balance before heading into SEC play, especially because there's 2 games after this Purdue game before you go into conference play that you probably will win. I don't want to jinx it, but those are games that you should probably win. But if you win this game, then you have potential to go into conference play with 1 loss. And I think that we've talked about that so much, but it would just be so huge for Kentucky to only have that 1 loss going into conference play, so that it'll help you out when you get to March.
Yeah, and Purdue, again, they're kind of contradictory themselves, because they're 5-4, but they've played some really good opponents. Well, they only beat Maine by 9. They beat Purdue Fort Wayne by 10, who Kentucky beat by 12. But we also played Louisville 48 hours before, so take that as you will. But Purdue's so contradictory of themselves. It makes no sense. They have a few pretty good players in their team. You have Destiny Lombard, 14.1 points per game, 5.2 rebounds per game, 3 steals per game. Reagan Bass, 13.3 points per game, 6.2 rebounds per game, 1.3 blocks per game. And then Lana McCarthy, 7.3 points per game, 6.4 rebounds per game. And then Sophie Swanson, 7.8 points per game, 2.3 assists per game. So those are really the names you need to know ahead of this game. Mainly Destiny and Reagan. That's kind of the big 1-2 punch there for Purdue. But other than that, I think that's really all you need to know about this team, Katie. I don't think that there's no real secret to the Boilermakers. That's just kind of who they are. But Kentucky's clearly the better team. but it's a game on the road against a power conference opponent. Again, you have to show up if you want to win this game.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit interesting too to note that Destiny Lombard has played in the SEC before. She started out as a freshman at LSU and she only played in a couple of games, but of course you still get that SEC experience. And then moved to Stephen F. Austin, which I can't think of what conference they're in right now, but it's a team that Kentucky probably never plays, if ever. But she was one of the best players there for her senior year. So
Yeah.
transferring back to a Power Four school like Purdue, it's not something that she isn't used to because she played at LSU. So she's kind of been in that kind of realm before. So I think if Kentucky has anyone to worry about, I feel like it's going to be Destiny. I feel like that's just the most obvious choice, but of course it could be anybody.
Yeah, and the other thing too is that Kentucky, and this is something that you saw like Notre Dame Texas played the other night, and I think all of Notre Dame starters played like 35 minutes plus, maybe 40 minutes plus,
Mhm.
because that game went to overtime, and Notre Dame beat Texas, and clearly like you can win with small rotations, and Kentucky has done that so far. But if there's anything to be concerned about, Purdue, 10 players on their team get 10 plus minutes per game. They play a bigger rotation than Kentucky. So I feel like this is something you could probably say every game, to be honest, but I feel like the fatigue and the conditioning may be something to look at too.
Yeah, I kind of hope that Kenny is able to play a deeper bench, but of course, if this game is closer than we expect it to be, he won't be able to do that. Luckily, the game is on Saturday, so a Monday night game to a Saturday game that gives Kentucky such a long time to recover. Hopefully, they got a full day off after their win against Queens, but I think just having that time to recover and rest, especially if Kenny has to play such a small rotation, I feel like that's going to be very important. But yeah, I would like to see a lot of players come off the bench because that means that we're winning.
Oh yeah,
Um,
of course, yeah.
but either way, I think it would be great to see Lexi Blue in there, see Cassidy Rowe get a good amount of minutes, and you know, just a bigger bench overall.
Yeah, and I mean, they're tall. I'm looking at it right now. Their tallest player is 6'4". She's a freshman. So Kentucky, well, it's Lana. It's Lana McCarthy, and so Kentucky. I mean, they'll have her to deal with, but Kentucky definitely has a size advantage too.
Mm.
Just one quick complaint. Again, December 14th at 5 p.m. this Saturday. That's like the exact same time as the UK Louisville men's game. What are we doing? Like, what is the scheduling? Like, who and why? Like, what is going on? Like, I mean, that UK Louisville game starts at, I think, technically 5:15, but it's the exact same time.
Mhm.
You know, people who want to follow. I mean, I don't blame a single soul for tuning into that UK Louisville game over the UK Purdue game. I would too,
Mhm.
almost. You know what I mean? But it's just unfortunate because you have people wanting to follow this women's team, and then again, I don't think a lot of this was in UK's hands.
No.
You're telling me they knew this was, like I don't think they wanted to do this, but I think they kind of had to do what they can do. But
Yeah, it's almost giving baller TV in a way. Like you have the game at the same time as Kentucky versus Louisville, which more Kentucky fans will be tuning into. And then you have the games against Illinois and Arizona State on something called Baller TV, which we had to buy a subscription to so that we could
yeah,
cover the games. Like
that was
nobody's gonna want to do that. It just reminds me of that. It's very funny. But
uh,
yeah, we'll be watching Kentucky versus Purdue, but keeping up with Kentucky Louisville on the side.
yeah, and we just hope that while you're watching Kentucky Louisville, you keep up with Kentucky Purdue.
Yes.
I just want to say real quick, I was talking to before the Queens game. I think it's okay for me to say this. I was talking to somebody fairly close to the program, not like someone like directly inside, but someone close to it, and they're like, "Dude, Baller TV was such an embarrassment. Like that was crap. Like that was just stupid." Actually, uh, I was told by someone else separate that that Kentucky fan base apparently bought more Baller TV subscriptions. I don't know. I don't even know how they gauge that. I guess maybe by looking at the area than like any other team has in like ever, apparently. So that's exciting. That's good to know that people are willing to put their hard-earned money into watching the team. But it's just crazy,
Mhm.
I can't believe, and yet you had like UConn Ole Miss. That's like a, number 2 UConn, and I think maybe at the time number 18, 19 Ole Miss. And it was on Flow Sports. What the hell is Flow Sports, Katie? Just I don't understand what we're doing, putting top ranked games on Baller TV and Flow Sports, but you do whatever you can. Like this game's on the Big Ten Network, so I think technically it's a national TV game. That's good. I don't know if everybody gets Big Ten Network, but I know it's technically a nationally broadcasted game. Purdue, I wanted to say this about them, kind of skipped over it. They're picked 13th out of 16th in the and on threes. I looked at the actual like official Big Ten preseason media poll. It only went to 5. Like it only listed the top 5 teams and like the coaches and the media poll. And I'm like, that doesn't help. Thanks. But yeah, picked 13th out of 16th in On Three's Big Ten preseason power rankings poll, or I guess not poll, just power rankings. But yeah, I guess that kind of gives you an idea of Purdue. But again, that's not a gimme game Saturday. It's not walking there half asleep and win. You have to come play.
Yeah.
You have to come ready. Katie, just before we get out of here, shorter episode today. Not as much to say, not as much to necessarily go over. Well, you know what? I guess real quick, right before we head out, thank you to today's sponsor, Friends of Cole, right? I guess it'd be good to kind of mention this. Our good friends at Friends of Cole. Friends of Coal is dedicated to informing and educating Kentucky citizens about the coal industry and its vital role in the state's future. We provide a united voice for an industry that has been and remains a critical economic contributor to Kentucky. By working together, we can provide good jobs and benefits for future generations. Coal is resilient, reliable, and affordable. Friends of Coal is a volunteer organization. All are invited to be a part of our organization, which consists of proud Kentuckians as well as residents from beyond our borders. Head to friendsofcoalkentucky.org to learn more. Again, that was friendsofcoalkentucky.org to learn more. But yeah, just again, not as much to talk about. Big game Saturday, big game, obviously, because if you lose, it's kind of a bad loss. But if you win, hey, Power 4 conference win on the road. Take it as you will. Whatever the result of that game is, we'll kind of write whatever narrative I guess we want to about it. But you win this game on the road at Purdue, and you have a pretty good chance to head into conference play with 1 loss. And I think that's a much better pace than we expected.
Yeah, I think so too, especially because at this point, I think we predicted 2 or 3 losses. So to just have 1 is really encouraging, and I'm excited to see what Kentucky can do for the rest of non-conference play heading into January.
And there we go. That we have it. I'm Phoenix Stevens. This is Katie Hutchison. Of course, Kentucky, they lost their first game of the season. But hey, there's plenty more wins left on the table. Plenty of time to build a resume. That's one of the beautiful parts of playing in the SEC. We will see you